I want to take. So I want to talk about our noses.
Our noses.
Yeah, look face on.
You know where the
I
nose
got
comes
bigger lips
from.
here.
Mm?
I got bigger lips.
There was one time that I had on dad's profile picture of him when I was like really young. This guy messaged me and was like, "Oh, is that your dad?" Auntie, who is that? I said, "That's my dad." Sexy lips. I said, "Wow."
Sexy lips. What the hell? That's so
Is that where you
inappropriate.
get them from? I was like, "Wow."
That's like that's so weird. What the flip? Tell me how you know this guy, please.
What we're gonna talk about after this? Do you know what I mean? Like, because
Yes,
I can
there's
see you're
nothing
clearly a
left to
bad
say.
businessman. You're a terrible husband.
Oh, you're calling this guy out. His whole.
Are you actually okay? But yeah, no, it's not to shame him for saying that blah blah blah, but appropriateness it just was not there.
Professionalism. So let's introduce ourselves. I'm here with the lovely Lilia,
And I'm here with the wonderful Toa.
and this is
My sister and I. There's like three different
basically
intros in this one sentence, by the way.
this is our offering to the world. This is our what's the word when you yeah, offering, isn't it? It is
Offering is the
offering.
right word. This is offering is the right word. This is what we're offering.
So we're talking about death. That's such a broad subject, broad topic of conversation. But I think the last 2 weeks, last month really, um, I think the subject has been brought to light again. I've had lots of thoughts around death and what it means and how we deal with it as a society. So I've got a question for you then. Can you have several interpretations of death of the meaning of death? What is death? Does it mean one thing to everyone everywhere?
That's a really good one because I think in one form, I think that it means the same for everybody. But then I think as well, there's like the little deaths that we sort of encounter that are not always treated with the same attention as the big death. The big death.
Mm. So give
The
me an
big death.
example of a little death
Mm,
kindly.
I have been fascinated with death for like the last, I want to say 6 years. I've been absolutely fascinated with it. Like, for me, there's an understanding of how, like, without death, there is no life. Without life, there is no death, right?
Mm.
And in that, I think about how death is present even on like our meals. Like, death is always present. And even within us, death is always present. Things, cells, are always dying and re reborning.
The science is wanting to science, but the scientist isn't there.
I want to
Let,
say
let's go back to
regenerate.
base. Let's go back to basics with A level biology. Not A
Wait,
level
wait, wait. I'm trying to think of
GCSE.
the word. I'm trying to think of the word, but the word's not coming. It's our understanding that then informs how we interact with it.
That's so profound.
Even when I'm eating a meal, I really do think about like just how much death has occurred to get here. I think about like
And then you lick your lips after you're done with
uh,
those ribs.
so because death is there, I must stop eating and enjoying my food. No, but
Mm,
I must acknowledge the journey that this food took, the people who are involved
but
in the
must.
creating of this food. So all of the life, like for the ribs, for me to have the ribs, someone must kill the animal. And for someone to kill that, like there must be desire for someone to feed their family in order for them to then kill the ribs, right? So death, love are always there,
No, let's not.
always.
Let's not have. Let's not put that line of thought into it. It's a machine that is slaughtering the animal, not a person. Yeah, you have to take the personal out of it.
Yeah, it's a
But
bit mad, but then also I'm not just talking about it from I guess I'm talking about it from like yes, from knowledge that this is how we eat meat here, but then also an understanding that when we're back home, for instance, the meat industry is not as industrialized as it is here. Like it's happening bit by bit, but it's not as bad as what it is here. It's not the machine that it is here. Like it's very different.
more localized
Yeah.
people who small farmers might take things to market because people still buy stuff from markets. People, most the average person probably doesn't do that whole food shop in a supermarket.
No.
Um, So they the way they consume food and interact with the ecosystem as is actually intended by Mother Earth is probably
Mm.
closer at
Well,
home. Obviously, it's not on the scale, industrialized scale here, but I guess it's probably closer than what happens here.
but then I also see that as sort of idealizing something that's not so, because even there, the way that it's been industrialized is somewhat different, but still the same. In that, even in the African context, we're still quite far from. We're getting further away from the food system as Mother Nature intended it.
Hmm. I think yeah, and then when you think of it like that way, taking it back to death, it's rooted in so much. When you have a slab of meat on your plate, it's not just death as you would have seen it maybe 400 years ago when someone eat. It's like crucial to survival, critical to survival if you're having some meat, some extra protein once or twice a week. But here, the death is actually almost ignored. What's
Mm,
happening because it's
mm, mm.
sanitized. When you go into the shop, the meat is bright pink. It's wrapped in cling film, all individual parts put uh, separate. Tend to forget that what's happening here is death. There's had to be a cycle of life. Something was born into this world and has ended its cycle and it's here on your plate. But because it's sanitized and we tend to not be aware that that's what's happened, that's where the food is coming from. And I think
Mm,
that's why when people are confronted with death, it's so shocking because
mm,
in society everything is anything that's related to death is sanitized or watered down. So when
mm.
people encounter death, they're unsure of how to interact with it.
I made a short little film about
You plugging that
basically,
in.
yeah, that no. Basically, it was about chicken specifically, because obviously here, like what is like so much of what you're saying, our interaction with that chicken is from a packet. So the only struggle is probably not the right word. The only yeah, the only vigorous action that is then involved within, from the time we buy it to the time we're actually eating it, is, when you're trying to like open it and you're trying to stab the little packet
Mm,
open. That's the hardest part of it. So I made something where someone was like killing a chicken, and then I had then put the sound of the chicken like dying, and then cut it with like sound of me like chopping like short bought chicken. And so
mm.
many people were like, "Oh my gosh, what the hell?" But then it's like you can't remove
That's the
the
reality
chicken
of it.
and the violence by and by,
Yeah, that's
you can't have one without the other.
why do you think people reacted in that way then when they saw that?
Because they don't want the dirty work, the quote unquote dirty work of actually seeing like a chicken being killed. They don't want the guilt, because then it becomes an animal, you know what I mean? Because it's not meat. If you're seeing it being killed, it's not just meat. But we think of meat as just meat. We tend to forget that these things,
Yeah,
like, they're multidimensional. Like, these things are also multidimensional. But then it's because we look at them and all we see of them is them in like a flipping clear plastic.
clear plastic.
And even when we then say, okay, let's see what they look like in their nature, it's in the Western world, it's almost impossible, because then you're seeing them in like battery packs. I mean, battery packs. What a long day.
I know what you meant. I know what you meant. So we'll skip over it. We'll see them in a battery pack. Don't worry, I'm with you, Stacey.
My friend, sometimes the English doesn't English, but it's okay.
Nope.
It's absolutely okay. um yeah, so what are your reflections on like death and stuff?
Death is all around. Actually, I wrote a poem for this part. I'm joking.
Why you
I'm
like this?
joking. Death is all around, but silent, and you have to get comfortable with with knowing that it's inevitable, and you actually, I think, find comfort in thinking about people I know dying because it's gonna happen. Whether I'm the one who's gonna go first or they might go first, but you can't escape it. You have to be. It's painful, even though we go through it. Every person's individual dealing with death is I'm sure, very painful. And what I hate is all the cliche stuff people say around, oh, this person would have wished this for you, or They'd be so proud of
Mm.
you. They're looking down on you. It's like, how do you know? It's just, don't just say cliche things. It's really hard to think of how to comfort people when they're going through death. They're experiencing
Especially
death.
when strangers will say it.
Yeah, it's like, what do you think is the best thing to say to someone who's grieving?
When I think of grief, I think that sometimes as people, we want to think of like saying the one thing that will then take away this person's pain, that will take away a
Hmm.
fraction of what this person is going through. But I think that sometimes trying to find those words is a bit selfish because then, you know, if I'm trying to go through everything that I'm trying to then say to you, by doing that, I arrive at a place where then I'm asking of you to pause your grieving so that you can react to what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
sometimes it's not necessarily about what we can say to people, but rather showing them that we're there.
yeah, I think that's more important than thinking about how you want to make yourself feel comfortable in that situation by saying the quote unquote right thing.
Mm,
But
mm.
all you can do is be there for someone, especially if they're grieving. And what is this? What are the seven stages of grief again? Anger.
Anger, there's acceptance, there's denial, there's
What
reckoning, there's there's a part where you're like, oh, take me instead of this person,
of this
or
person?
why didn't you take Johnny down the road?
Why do you take Johnny down? Why are you beefing Johnny? What did he do to you? What's this? Who's Johnny?
No, but okay,
Johnny.
grief is funny. Grief is funny because then in your mind you can even start to think of who would have been better off situated
Yeah.
to go rather than the person who's gone.
Do you think you'll be aware when you're dying? Like, like this is my last breath. Like that. Do you think that's how it
Oh
will
my
happen?
gosh.
Or do you think it's
Well,
like, oh, I'm breathing, and then it's like, oh, I'm not anymore,
not
and I'm
anymore.
gone? Yeah.
Mm. Or maybe you become aware of like that you're shedding your body. Maybe I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Do
think
you
that
know?
there's hmm?
No, go on.
Oh, I was gonna say that maybe death has like little calling cards, like little signs and symptoms only that you know um that time's coming.
What about someone who like dies very abruptly in a car crash, something?
Um, I don't know because then for me, because I know that I don't know anything about death. All of this is just like you know theories I throw around and like okay, so yes, um so how I always think about it is that even if it's like a car crash, right, you were supposed to go in that moment, so
Yeah, for sure.
maybe even in that moment leading up to that there were things that were happening that could be read as like a sign.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and the thing is, I think sometimes when I say sign, I don't mean that you're gonna wake up and you're like you get text saying tomorrow you'll die, but I don't know, something must happen, something must happen, I don't know.
So this is the youngest you're ever gonna be anymore.
Basically, basically.
Wow, that's so
And at
profound.
this moment, everything that you know right now is like a fraction to what you know at any other time, you know?
Oh my god, that's so profound.
Mm?
Even though, like you said earlier, you don't know you're just speculating about what will happen, and you don't know what happens in death. Nobody who's alive knows. I think it's something you have to give thought to because
Yeah.
even if you die and nothing happens, if you don't put any thought to it, then you're kind of running away from the fact that you're gonna have to go through it at some point.
Mm.
And actually, for myself, I like to remind myself that I'm actually not mortal. Is that mortal, isn't it? I'm not
Mm.
immortal. I'm not
Immortal.
immortal. I'm mortal. One day too shall die. And when you constantly remind yourself that, then you can live your life with a bit more, with a sense of more like fire up your bum kind of. What's the word? With a sense of not urgency, but you feel because it's inevitable and it's gonna happen. You want to make the most out of what I want to make the most out of what the time that I am on this earth. So it's like, oh
Mm.
yeah, I'm gonna die soon. Not soon, but hopefully, I don't know
At
when,
some
but
point.
at some point, yeah. So let me actually make use of the time I've got left and not just sit on my bum and watch Netflix or something.
How
Which I'm
often do you think about death?
death a lot, I think, because obviously I think about dad, and that's he's obviously dead. Um,
Really? Sorry.
what? Yes, really. What the flip? What did you get out of that? And I feel like also I think about my own death as well. I think about the death of other people who are alive. And I feel like I also think about death in the most inappropriate time as well.
Go on.
Why are you? Why did your eyes do that? Like you feel like I'm gonna say something that's really juicy.
Because I want to know what this inappropriate time is.
No, like just a lot. It just comes up in my mind a lot. It's like, oh yeah, death, yeah, yeah, death, yeah.
Would you say you're quite scared of death, or have you made your peace with death?
I made my peace with death. I'm not scared to die. It's like I think of it this way. Think about what life was like before you could remember anything. So to me, that doesn't scare me, or I'm not, because that's what I imagine death will be like. It'll be like nothingness, just the end of consciousness, and it's like,
Mm,
I, it's it's like I'm not scared of it. I think it's nothing to be scared of.
I love that. I love that for you. I love that. What's been some of the things that have like changed since your experience of death? What's been something profound that has either changed or something that you have then been able to deeply understand?
That when somebody dies, you cannot be angry and you cannot be upset. You must only be grateful for the time you spent with that person on this earth,
Mm.
like a gift. And so that's why I feel like when I encounter death more and more again, and I know we'll encounter each other soon. Not soon, sometime, whenever. You cannot
At
be
some point.
angry. You just have, yeah, at some point, yeah, in my life, I'm sure you have to be grateful and see, wow, I'm lucky enough to have spent that time with that person and met that person. And I think that's not something you can learn until you encounter death. And I've actually gone through the grieving process. And I think also when people like cry when someone dies, it actually comes from a selfish perspective. Because
Mm.
why are you crying? No, why are you crying? What are you- but when you think about it, like, why are you upset? It goes back to you yourself. You think, I'm
Yeah.
never gonna see that person again, so you don't think about the other person.
And what they're getting
But
out of
w-
this potential, I mean, this death, right?
this, yeah, it's like it's all comes back to you thinking about yourself and being put, and
But
because
doesn't
you're
that
thinking
selfishness come from a human level, like human understanding of, like a human processing?
of the death.
Mm.
Like, no, it comes from this person can no longer serve me in this life,
Yeah.
so I'm sad.
Of course, but isn't selfishness so inherent to human to the human experience that for many people it takes a long time in order to not only like come out of that, because I mean people won't name it selfish, but it is quite selfish, yes, of course, but like to
If
move out
you
of that into acceptance.
if you take not a telescope, a microscope, and dig into the what grief is made out of, it's all made out of eyes, 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 eyes.
Mm,
And selfishness is intrinsic to the human experience, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good quality,
mm.
and it's not a quality that I think it can serve us in certain ways, but when you move out of that selfishness and step out of it to see what other coat you can put on, you can actually use death to learn from it rather than putting the coat on of selfishness.
Yeah, I hear it completely, but then I guess that I maybe interact with that sentiment from a point of like empathy, because
Okay,
I think sometimes
explain.
you have to let that selfishness out. I think there's space to grieve for what you thought life would be with this person, to sort of grieve all the things that the could haves, would
Yeah,
haves, all of that
for
kind of
sure.
stuff.
And I'm not saying that when I grieve, I won't grieve from that place anymore.
Oh yeah, no, 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 no. You're a bit more like, all right then,
No,
enough now.
no, not enough now.
No, not enough now like that, but like from a point of like understanding that this is all eyes, eyes, eyes. You know what I mean?
Mm.
The thing about death as well is that it asks us to be very honest with ourselves about who we are or who we think we are. I think depending on who the person is around you who's then passed, not in relation to any of the past funerals that we've had, blah 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 blah. You know those asterisks that comes with what I'm about to say. But I think that sometimes ego gets so like ego doesn't process death well because then by this person going, this part of me is gone. Am I ready for this part of me to then go? This idea that I've held of myself to then go, what does that gap then leave for me? Because then ego wants to then fill that with something else, with another identity, with another cap, with another understanding of self, you know? Yeah, it becomes difficult because, again, I think if you don't allow yourself to flow through all the feelings of grief, you can really get like lost in some of the most darkest places you could ever go with that, you know?
So you're
And if
saying
on top
when
of that you're scared of death, on top of that you're scared of all of that comes in, I think, and this is why it's so important for us to talk about these things because grief can make people really can take people really dark places, which is understandable, but it doesn't have to be like that.
do you think you can grieve without ego?
Can you grieve without ego? I think no, you can't.
No.
No. You're talking about grief without ego. I think then the seven steps almost become null because then you fully understand that what I'm doing is celebrating this person's life. What I'm doing is celebrating the love that I experienced from this person. What
Mm.
I'm doing is then acknowledging that every time I interacted with this person, it was magical, it was special, and only what we had in the context of where we had it and all the time what we had it made our relationship special. And then I think without ego, you're able to then let that go to welcome this new phase of this spirit's like journey. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
um because then I think that once ego understands that, because I think for me my understanding is that ego will then be hooked on the fact that this body is dead and completely overlook the fact that there's a spirit that was walking within that body.
So do you think then uh understanding it's easier to understand death if you have a spiritual religious uh background because then you don't overlook that.
mm, I don't think it's essential in that, because sometimes when we say that you have to be this kind of person to understand, I feel like that's also ego speaking. I think the only way that I can say is that
Oh,
you
this ego, we're gonna have to do an episode about ego.
one of my favorite poems is Ego Tripping by Nikki Giovanni. I love it.
Oh, should I read it?
um no, it's better if you hear it because the way that she does it with the drums and all of that is beautiful.
Okay,
Absolutely beautiful.
send me a text so I can remember it. Are we allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, I mean,
What is all this fact? Why are you looking like? Why are you like
you're
so?
such a peculiar child.
I am a bit odd, aren't I? I'm a bit strange. Just deep, just
You're very peculiar. You're very peculiar, love. You're very
very
peculiar.
strange. I think this should be the opening episode, and then we can delve a bit more afterwards and more, and then until we end the season. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Well, this was fun.
All right.
Okay, death has taught me to let go.
A woman of so little words. Let go, and let go, and let God.
I'm not a woman.
Oh, you're a woman X N.
Right?
Oh
Why?
yeah, you're.
Someone called me like I'm seeing how I'm like feeling about some of these like gendered terms. I really don't like when people call me like, oh, that lady.
Why?
Oh, I don't like
Because
it.
you said don't gender me, don't know me.
Mhm. Yeah. Don't
No,
perceive me. Don't perceive me.
when we do our intros, I say I'm here with Lilia, she, her, they, them. You say Toa, she, her, they, them. I can go by they, them. Don't mind.
Because you are they them or
No, I don't mind either way. I can be. I don't mind. I can be with gender. I cannot be with gender. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with the wonderful, gorgeous, multi-talented,
oh
uh,
gosh.
Lilia. They,
Oh
them.
gosh. Oh gosh. The beautiful, the lovely, the beautiful ish. Gosh, look at
Then you're
me.
gonna go the nice. Bloody hell! Don't,
The
don't say
annoying,
the.
the annoying, the peculiar,
Mm,
the weird and
very.
wonderful Toa.
Mm.
They, them, and she.
Thank you for joining.